Hey, Ben Kraus here. Wanted to bring you a story that we're investigating right now with one Marine veteran named Maria Jewell. Now, we had just met her a little bit ago yesterday and has a very compelling story, very disturbing about what appears to be a sniping by the quality review team of the Department of Veterans Affairs, sniping on veterans with PTSD, doing random checks and reduction actions behind the scenes, not dissimilar to what a lot of us have fought against within, communism in the USSR. Now we're seeing it within the Department of Veterans Affairs, as many of you are aware. I am accompanied here with my friend and colleague, Brian Lewis.
Pleasure.
And also Marine veteran, Maria Jewell. We're going to get to the bottom of the story here at the Department of Veterans Affairs to find out what happened and why it is that the agency reduced her rating of more than 5 years down from 100% SMC S to 40% right before Christmas. Now, in this instance, the Marine veteran, as a consequence of the very sudden reduction, is just given an eviction notice. We're coming into Christmas time. It is below zero here in outside of Minneapolis, and what the agency is doing in this instance is inhumane, and we also believe it's illegal, not just unethical or possibly a mistake, but what we have looked at this point appears to be an illegal action of a kind that may result in further legal recourse beyond just merely the administrative process. So without further delay, I'm going to kick it over to Maria to tell a little bit about her story, and then we're going to have Brian wrap up as we're driving to go do the investigation. Here's Maria.
Hi, Maria Jewell. I'm a United States Marine veteran, MST survivor, and was typical with military women in service, what happens with them. Served 97 to 2012, and 100% post-traumatic stress, service-connected disability. But I received a letter, actually I didn't receive a letter. I noticed that my service-connected compensation was reduced significantly. I called the VA, and what had happened, what they told me was that the reduction was due to a lack of evaluation from a medical appointment that I allegedly had, but I was never notified by the Veterans Administration to attend that appointment. And so this has created not only a hardship financially, emotionally. It has triggered a lot of circumstances and events from my past, and I just feel like I am just reliving this whole situation again. There was just really no notice to the reduction in VA benefits. Again, single mom, I have a daughter, we're being displaced from our home, and I just want a voice. I just need a voice and to be heard, and this is what these gentlemen are doing, is fighting for us vets to have a voice, that because this was not right, and I don't understand it, and it's a really scary situation to be in.
All right, thanks, Maria. Here, Brian.
Afternoon, everybody. So I met Staff Sergeant Jewell yesterday at the Minnesota Assistance Council for Veterans Legal Clinic, which takes place pretty much every second Tuesday of the month at the Minneapolis VA healthcare system. And because we're in Minnesota, I cannot represent her. Because she lives in the state of Minnesota, I cannot represent this Marine. And I have signed her as a client for that purpose, and we will address that through the federal court process. But today what I want to know is how the VA unlawfully reduced this staff sergeant, this Marine, from 100% with SMC to 40% because of a reevaluation, a reexamination that she was never notified about. I also know that her medical history for the last 5 years has shown no sustainable improvement. So the agency, at least as far as I know right now, has violated their own law. As for the homeless aspect of it, I will be handling that as well, because No Marine should go into battle like this without having someone on their six, and I will be that person. But we've seen this time and again with the agency, where the VA constantly reviews PTSD claims, pursuing the fallacy that people will fake or malinger about symptoms related to PTSD. It's been proven time and again that this is not true, and this is a narrative that the VBA continues to endorse even in the absence of evidence. And I want to find the bottom end of that. I also want to find out how she signed up with a state county veteran service officer, and then found out years later that her true power of attorney rested with the American Legion. That's wrong. That's improper. When you sign with someone, you're signing with them because you trust that agency. You're not signing with them to deal it out like a deck of cards to whichever VSO might pick it up that day. So hopefully today I'll have the answers for that. Hopefully Ben and I will be coming back at you live once we've done that, and we'll be able to update the status. You can follow disabledveterans.org for more details. You can also follow me for more details, as we expect to continue this process into litigation to help advance the interests of all veterans, not only in Minnesota, but throughout the U.S. Thanks.
All right, there you have it, folks. So we're going to be getting to the bottom of it, and we'll circle around once we have a little bit more information. For now, we're going to go take a look at the records that are available through the electronic system, and with the hope of getting to the bottom of what happened and to put a stop to it as quickly as possible. Our hope is that this Marine veteran and her daughter will not be spending Christmas homeless. Hey, Ben Kraus here with disabledveterans.org. I'm following up with my colleague Brian Lewis, following up on the tragedy of Maria Jewell and what's going on with her particular matter. We were following up here to tell you about what we learned once we went to the St. Paul Regional Office. Maria's not in the car with us, but we are, as seems to be the tradition, decided to come back out to the car to follow up with everyone who's following this really interesting particular case. Now, I want to, before we really get into talking about what we learned and what went on, want to point out that the folks at the VA employees at the Fort Snelling Regional Office were fantastic. We went there to try to help Maria just get to the bottom of it. Neither Brian or myself are her power of attorney. I'm not representing her in any manner related to the benefits adjudication, and neither is Brian. He's helping the veteran with another matter. But to catch anyone up who didn't see what happened, Maria Jewell, Marine veteran, 100% SMC S, MST survivor, had come into the office a few days ago with a real tragic story coming into the holiday, where she and her daughter may be homeless if we can't get things turned around, or if the VA can't get things turned around for her. And we just couldn't really figure out what was going on at the time, and looking at her records, or the records that she had, other than the obvious thing, which was that she wasn't being treated fairly. And aside from that, we were about as in the dark as the veteran was about what was going on. So we traveled to the St. Paul Regional Office with Maria to help her get to the bottom of it. Again, neither Brian nor I represent her with respect to her disability compensation benefits, but as being advocates in the way that we are, we went with her to the VA. And again, to call out the St. Paul VA Regional Office under Kim Graves. They were very helpful in at least facilitating the process of helping Maria review her records within the VBMS digital system. So I want to point that out. They were real gracious and got us in right away to try to get to the bottom of it. And hopefully she will not be homeless before Christmas, but we'll see. So anyway, here's Brian. He's going to give a rundown of what we learned. We're still going to be looking into this. I'm looking at it from the perspective of, being an advocate and a journalist trying to, understand on the broader scale of things what is going on with these rating reductions and these future scheduled claims. What exactly is going on? And so we're trying to get to the bottom of it. I'm reviewing some trainings that I have from the Department of Veterans Affairs that they've provided me to gain better insight and also to educate the public and veterans in particular about what goes on with these rating reductions. And at least to this point, what we have found is really concerning, and a lot of other veterans as well as the public should be worried about how VA is conducting these types of processes, including how they are updating mail. Big problem. They're not doing it the right way internally, and I'm not sure if it's the contractor's fault or if it's the VA's fault or what exactly is going on, but veterans and me as an attorney, the system is not updating our records properly regarding where we're located. And so VA is frequently mailing correspondence both to attorneys as well as to veterans, very often to the wrong address where the veteran or the attorney hasn't been for many, many years. And despite the VA having the correct information in the system, they're just simply not updating that information in a timely manner, or zeroizing it and going back to the old retroactive addresses and then sending correspondence that is very important to the wrong location. Big problem here. So we're getting to the bottom of it. Anyway, here's Brian to catch you up on what we found and what how Maria is doing. Okay, here you go, Brian.
Hey, campers. It's a warm, snowy Friday afternoon up here in the beautiful state of Minnesota. And here is what we found. Here's the freshest news from the teletype. Went into VA yesterday afternoon. Like Mr. Kraus said, I want to congratulate the staff at the St. Paul VA Regional Office. They were outstanding. A lot of times I can always find something to fault with VA, but their customer service in this instance is the exception. I cannot fault that. Kim Graves has apparently been instructing her staff well, and her staff is apparently carrying out her wishes in that regard. So kudos to the St. Paul VA Regional Office. So we get in this file, and we find out that, oh yes, VA has the correct address in their system. When someone from the Chicago VA Regional Office requested a re-examination, they had her correct address in there, and it was only when the mail went out that they started using an address that my client hadn't lived at in about 3 years. So we know that they're going at least that far back in sending out mail to the wrong address. So they get the mail back, and they do no investigation to find out why this mail is coming back. If there's a correct address, they didn't reach out, and they just went ahead and slammed the reduction through. We did find out yesterday that they did have the notes in the system, or 2 days ago, that they did have the notes in the system from the VA healthcare system where she's receiving care, saying that her symptoms had not gotten better at all. So this is colloquially called develop to deny. In this case, they used the fact that she didn't report to reduce her to the lowest possible percentage. And yes, you should be angry at that because it's a crying shame. VA's not supposed to develop to deny. VA's supposed to maximize benefits where possible. They didn't do that here. They took her failure to report, even though she had no information about it, and just rocked her down as far as they could. Not only through her PTSD, but through any other claim she had active. One thing we did find out was that with regards to the special review team, we could not independently confirm or deny that. It looks, part of the paperwork looks like it was going right, and then it decided to go very wrong. And by that I mean part of the paperwork says she was scheduled for a 5-year re-exam, but the decision letter states that it was a mandated special review. So there is some internal inconsistencies, and it proves that the left hand of the VBA may not know what the right hand of the VBA is doing. And that's disturbing, especially when a veteran is dependent upon them for the necessities of daily living. So then we thanked the staff at the VBA and moved on across to the Veteran Service Officer, who is responsible for her case that she knew nothing about. And I'm going to discuss this in depth because you really need to know this. First hint first. Do not sign a blank form. I do not care if they say, oh, just sign this and we'll take care of it. Thou shalt not sign a blank form. That is what happened here as far as we're able to determine. My client signed a blank 21 form, VA form 21-22, and a blank NAC VSO form 1. For those of you who don't know what a NAC VSO form 1 is, it's the National Association of County Veteran Service Officers form 1. It is used to transfer your representation from the county veteran service officer to the national service officer, the National Veteran Service Officer. So for instance, you think you're seeing your folks in whatever county and they're doing right by you? No. They've transferred your representation to generally one of the big 6, and we all know the big 6. So we go in there and we meet her veteran service officer. And interestingly enough, it was one of the people who had testified that attorneys should... Actually, I'm going to hold on to that. Let me back up. Let me retract that. So we go in there and we find her veteran service officer. Her veteran service officer decides to tell her the important thing is not that there's a legal problem with her reduction, but that they should just go ahead, file a supplemental claim, and show hardship to get it increased. No. N-O exclamation point. If you have a legal argument in your claim, thou shalt make it at that time. Who are the big 6? Don Elliott wants to know. Big 6 would be American Legion, Disabled American Veterans, VFW, Paralyzed Veterans of America, Vietnam Veterans of America, and American Veterans. Those are the big 6. But we go in there and he says, well, we can just set you up for an exam and I'll use my contacts at the VA regional office. To quote my favorite colonel, horse hockey. The VSOs don't have any more contacts than anybody else. Yes, they're friendly with people, but we can go in there, your attorney can go in there, your claims agent can go in there and be just as friendly and get the same results. So if you start hearing a line from your VSO that says, I'll use my contacts, that's when you know they're starting to snow you. And a legal argument should always be made at the first sign of trouble. If you have a legal argument, in this case it was that she never received proper notice, therefore the reduction wasn't properly effectuated, you should make it. Make the legal arguments, because if you don't, you will waive the legal argument. Point blank and period. And in my client's case, I'm hoping that she is able to avoid the reduction. I'm hoping they're able to restore her benefits and grant her the back pay, so that way she's not sleeping out in the streets come Christmas, because if you look outside here, it's 23 degrees and I see white stuff coming from the sky. Yeah, I agree with you, Don. What the? And let's also talk about the VA. Always, always, always keep your address and phone number updated with the Veterans Benefits Administration. The VA is comprised of 3 main administrations: the Veterans Benefits Administration, the Veterans Health Administration, and the National Cemeteries Administration. If you don't have your address updated with the Veterans Benefits Administration, if you haven't sent them a letter, do so. Make sure your address is correct. Updating it with the Veterans Health Administration will not do the trick. So make sure your address is right. Make sure you can wave a sheet of paper and say, "Hey, I told you." And with that, I think I'm going to cut it loose because it's snowing and I have to get on the road to D.C. Mr. Kraus has to finish up with his time, so that way we can go to D.C. for our next set of fun and adventure kicking VA in the teeth. So y'all have yourselves a good weekend, and I'm sure we'll be back on here come next week discussing our next scenario to kick VA. Have a good one, guys.
All right, so there you heard it from Mr. Brian Lewis, a great attorney and veteran advocate here in, like we keep saying, sunny Minnesota. You know, we've had just a bunch of snow here recently. It's very cold. So anyway, that's basically the gist of what's going on. Next week, we're going to be in D.C. dealing with the whole privacy rights issue where the VA is unlawfully propagating or moving our protected health information into different databases without a current and correctly promulgated system of records notice. So that's what we're doing next week. This week, of course, we spent a little bit of time at the St. Paul Regional Office trying to get to the bottom of what's going on for our fellow veteran, Maria Jewell. Keep her in your prayers and thoughts. She's, you know, working hard to get her feet under her and happen to have this happen without obviously any notice and the information being sent to the wrong address that's 5 years old without the VA, you know, looking really into it. And want to also point out that when we had asked the particular veteran service officer about what happened, he informed us that veteran service officers do not do case management. So just a little bit of a delineation here between attorneys and apparently VSOs here in Minnesota, at least. Attorneys must do case management. The whole point of, you know, hiring an attorney is making sure your stuff is current and correct and presently presented to the agency, etc., and that we know what's going on. Apparently, at least according to the individual we spoke to 2 days ago, the VSOs here in Minnesota do not do case management and do not follow up. They do not make sure that your addresses are correctly input into the system, and they do not double check to make sure that their veterans show up for appointments. And also to verify whether or not the veteran knew the appointment was going on, which appears to be what happened here. So anyway, you know, again, buyer beware. You get what you pay for, and if you're looking for free help, you're going to get that. And you're not going to get the case management that you're probably thinking you're getting when you sign up. And as we also found out, you may not even be represented by the person that you thought you signed up with. And that's also part of what we learned here, is that when you sign up with information, or sign up rather for representation with your county veteran service officer, they are moving, in many instances, your representation to one of the big six, and many veterans don't know that's what's going on. It's a very contentious point of, it's confusing, and the veterans themselves are not being informed. So again, if I ever did something like that as an attorney, I would lose my license almost immediately. You can't just do that. You can't transfer somebody's case to someone else like that. But in this instance, a lot of veterans are just not aware of what's going on. They're being asked to sign blank documents, or at least documents where they're not being explained to as to what's going on. And here we are. So hopefully when it comes to Maria's situation, this will get resolved. Again, you really got to do your own research. If you're using a veteran service officer or CVSO, make sure that you fully understand what's going on, because in their mind, they're not responsible for making sure that you're informed about the status of your particular matter. So definitely be sure that you understand what's going on. No one will care more about your claim than you. That's always true anyway. But just remember that, especially when you're working with somebody that's working for you for free, and they have a caseload of, you know, 1,000, 10,000 veterans, they're not going to get back to you it's just impossible. Their caseload is impossibly high. So I just want you to be aware. And otherwise, we'll look forward to touching base with y'all when we're in DC. Pretty exciting stuff with respect to the privacy issue, veterans' health records, the new electronic health system, and litigating that with respect to the Department of Justice. So anyway, we'll talk to you all soon. Take care. Have a great weekend.